Good evening, I'm Abe.
And I'm Frank. And tonight, we're adumbrating the second half of Chapter 21, The Furnace of the Civil War, in Kennedy, Cohen, and Bailey's The American Pageant textbook. Abe, take it away.
All right. Union General Grant was transferred to Tennessee, where Grant liberated the city of Chattanooga and therefore cleared the way for the Union invasion of Georgia. Command of this Georgia conquest was given to General Sherman, who began Sherman's march through Georgia. The Union soldiers on this march burned buildings, destroyed railroads, and looted houses with the overall purpose of destroying the supplies of the Confederate Army and weakening the Southern morale. As a result, many Confederates began to desert. Sherman was successful and eventually managed to seize the city of Savannah and continue into South Carolina. Now, Frank, how did politics affect the Civil War?
Well, Lincoln had to deal with political enemies as well as military ones, with the Republican-dominated Congressional Committee on the Conduct of War continually pushing for emancipation. Additionally, the Democrats had divided in the wake of Douglas's death, with some advocating for war and some advocating for peace. The Copperheads emerged, a radical Democratic spin-off totally against the war. A case-in-point example was Clement Vallandigham, whose anti-Union statements were so seditious he was exiled to the South, though he eventually returned to his native Ohio. This episode inspired the penning of Philip Nolan's The Man Without a Country, which showcases the fate of one of the Aaron Burr conspirators. But Abe, can you tell me, during this time, wasn't there a presidential election?
Yes. To win the election, Lincoln had to retain Republican support and avoid threats from the Copperheads and the Peace Democrats. The Republican Party, fearing defeat, joined with the War Democrats and became the Union Party. Lincoln overall was impugned for lacking force, for being too willing to compromise, and for failing to win the war thus far. Andrew Johnson was chosen as Lincoln's vice president to garner support from the War Democrats and the border states. The Democrats nominated General McClellan to run against Lincoln, and thus began the nasty campaign of 1864 as both parties insulted each other. Lincoln was re-elected with a decisive electoral vote, but a much closer popular vote. However, Lincoln didn't gain widespread support until the war picked up with several Union victories in succession. Overall, when the Northern Democrats were defeated in the 1864 election, the last remaining hope for Southern victory disappeared. Now, Frank, could you tell me about the eventual defeat of General Lee?
Absolutely. By now, Lincoln had realized that he needed someone who could drive forward and press the Union's advantage in number. The man for the job was Grant. Grant's motto was, when in doubt, fight. And when he met Lee in the Wilderness Campaign, he did just that. Though taking extremely heavy casualties, by the time February of 1865 rolled around, the South was on its last legs. Grant had realized that he could lose 2 soldiers for every 1 lost by the South, and win. And to achieve his end, he did just this, taking heavy casualties, as I said, but still all the time pressing forward. A few months later, Lee surrendered to Grant outside the Appomattox courthouse, bringing the Civil War to an end. Abe, I recently had a chance to see the beginning of Daniel Day-Lewis's award-winning film, Lincoln, but I didn't get to see the end. Can you remind me how it concluded?
Of course. John Wilkes Booth murdered Abe Lincoln, the great emancipator, on April 14, 1865. However, Lincoln's dramatic death helped to erase memories of his faults and, better yet, highlight his nobler qualities. Initially, many Southerners and Northern Copperheads celebrated Lincoln's death, but eventually they realized that Lincoln's willingness for merciful post-war policies and fair treatment would have served them well. If Lincoln had lived, he indubitably would have conflicted with Congress and could even have been impeached, like Johnson, since the legislative branch generally attempts to win back its powers lost during the war. However, it is unlikely that any major conflicts would have arisen, since Lincoln possessed great rationality, strong leadership skills, and an abundance of common sense. But Frank, What were the overall effects of the Civil War?
Well, in total, 600,000 soldiers lost their lives to the war, adding up to 2% of America's total population. Additionally, the war had cost the nation $15 billion. However, the victory inspired a new age of democracy to come into bloom, not only in the US, but throughout the world, as witnessed by the British Reform Bill of 1867. And in conclusion, this chapter laid out a frame-by-frame analysis of the battles and campaigns employed by both the North and the South, and the eventual triumph of the Union over the Confederacy. The greatest generals of the century, Grant and Lee, fought tooth and nail, and the South fought itself into starvation, putrefaction, and ruin. But in the end, the Union prevailed. Thank you for watching. Please make sure to check in next time and like and subscribe.
And don't forget to comment down below if you have any questions. We'll catch you guys next time.